if you are serious about DevRel, you want to plan for it. So if you have someone who knows how to put a plan together, knows how to make sure that the different parts internally, in terms of the internal stakeholders, are really gathered and really bought into whatever you're doing, that is a seal of approval to get someone who's going to be doing the day-to-day out in the world work to make sure that they know that they're being supported.
Welcome, fellow avocados, to Developer Advocast, a podcast where we learn how the proverbial guacamole is made directly from some of the most prolific dev advocates around. My name is Jeremy Hess, head of DevRel at Achilles.io.
And since you've already heard me, I'm Sharone Zisman, the bane of Jeremy's existence and his jokes. I like to call myself the chief manual reader at rtfmphase.dev. And we plan to bring you every 2 to 3 weeks new episodes, and we'll be interviewing some awesome folks. We'll be joking around because that's what me and Jeremy do. And, bringing, really great topics that we want to talk about in the DevRel sphere.
We hope that you subscribe on Apple or Spotify, and please give us a 5-star rating. Here we go.
Here goes nothing.
Welcome back, everyone, to Developer Advocast. We're really excited for this episode. We have 2 fantastic guests who we are going to introduce very soon. I will say their names, though: Matty Stratton and Wesley Faulkner. And we're super excited to have you guys. And this episode took quite a while to get together. Finally, we managed after a couple months of back and forth. And
I think it was weeks, not months, but I'll allow it.
Fine, weeks, not months. I remember hearing that somewhere. I don't remember where. Yeah, we won't get into that. So we are talking about hiring DevRels / developer advocates / whatever you want to call them, because that topic never gets old. So thanks so much, guys, for showing up. And let's get into this right away. And before we get into sort of like the interview and chatting conversation part, Sharone, why don't you start us off with some shout outs?
Yes. So I guess you'll know the date, but today starts DockerCon virtual, but exciting news announced: Docker extensions, and a good friend from the community, Martin Wimpress, Slim AI's head of community, shared a really good write-up on how to build your own from scratch. So we'll link to that in the show notes. Really great write-up, and you should check out that new functionality from Docker. Yay for open source.
And if you haven't seen it yet, DevOps Days, the Stand with Ukraine lineup was announced. It's an amazing lineup, so definitely check it out. And there are still ways to support them, so go ahead and have a look at that. We'll also put that in the show notes.
Yes, important non-for-profit initiative. Really, it's a charity event, so if you can, donate. While not everyone speaks Hebrew, I am excited to have been able to participate in a cool community initiative, the Dev Interrupted community, which has been a really great engineering podcast for engineering leaders, and now has an edition in Hebrew. So you can check that out, devinterrupted.com, from our friends from Linear B. Well, Jeremy, remember in the last episode with, it wasn't the last episode, one of the last episodes with JJ and Quinn, we were talking about traveling on steroids. So here goes I'm back to traveling now for conferences, and I'm going to DevOps for less than 24 hours. I don't know what I'm thinking to myself. So talking about burnout and crazy travel, but I'm excited to be going back to, a mega event finally after so long. Matty and Wesley are probably used to traveling. I'm guessing Matty will be going to KubeCon and other stuff soon.
Yeah,
tell us about your crazy trips.
It started to come back, so I feel like I eased into it a little bit last year. I remember just kind of funny. My first trip I did since COVID started was last summer. I went to our company's picnic in Seattle, and everyone's like, "Why would you go all the way to that?" And I said, "Because I wanted my first time on a plane to be no other stress, right? I didn't want to be the combination of like first conference back, first whatever." That's fine.
That's a good idea.
It was cool. It was cool. But yeah, so it's kind of back. Things have really picked up this year. Last month I was at DevOps Days Raleigh and DevOps Days Denver. I'll be at KubeCon.
Keynotes.
Yeah. By the way, we tell my boss it was a keynote. I think we all need to also remember that at most DevOps Days, being the keynote just means you were the first person who spoke. Is sort of how I look at them, because they'll be at KubeCon, and then next month I'll be at DevOps Days Amsterdam.
Yes, right.
I'll be at DevOps Days Seattle, Scale, which is the South California Linux
Los
Expo,
Angeles,
which is
right.
super awesome. Yeah. And but it's interesting because I kind of am thinking, this may be news to people a little bit, but like this might be the year that I kind of hang up my lanyard a little bit. I'm needing to cut travel a little bit with between family and dogs and stuff. So I'm hoping to, do some other types of DevRel stuff. We got plenty of time. You'll see, but this is maybe my not farewell tour, but this is me saying like show up at all the events I'll be at, because you never know.
Now I'm having real FOMO because I don't think.
Well, it's okay. Just this is the last year. I mean, Sharone, DevOps Days Tel Aviv 2022. This might be your last chance to get me. So
first it was Elton, and now it's you, Matty.
I think I didn't formally introduce Matty. So Matty Stratton, Senior Developer Advocate at Pulumi. And that's how we do things around here as an afterthought. But I'd love to introduce Wesley Faulkner, and you are today at, remind me,
Single store database.
Single store, cool. And he's also a developer advocate. And Wesley, apropos traveling to DevOps, wrote an excellent post on the news stack about hiring DevRels with Shai Almog, who will be with me at DevOps. That's the connection, in case that was hard to connect the dots there. Really, really great post, which is one of the reasons we have Wesley here specifically on the show. And Matty, historically, I've seen him, across his many roles that he's held, hiring DevRels and doing really interesting stuff on that. So I thought they could have incredible insights for us on the process, the thinking, some of the stuff you need to think about when hiring for these roles. So welcome.
And we'll link to the blog post in the show notes as well.
Yes, absolutely.
I have to do these housekeeping things.
So I guess Wesley, since you wrote the post on it, I'll start with you. With what are some of the most common kind of facepalm mistakes you've seen in DevRel hiring processes?
Well, I first say I co-hosted it. I was maybe the instigator, but all the words were to my generous co-writer who wrote most of the stuff down. It started with a thread in the Slack community that we're all part of, the DevRel Slack collective, DevRel collective on Slack. I've been looking for, it was a time when I was looking for a new role, and I was getting approached, like we all do, from developer relations recruiters looking for people for roles. And usually a lot of them are like, if you have any experience in DevRel, they're like, hey, be the first, you have experience, please form this group at this startup, you get to choose how we spend the time, and you get to shape the program. They use that as like a really big deal, like, oh wow, you'll be able to actually form
like the incentive
and do DevRel the right way, right? And we talked like in the pre-show how like these are laundry lists of requirements that they're asking for this miracle person to do, and I've actually done those roles before in the past, and I've seen it from the inside out of why they're flawed. And so my blog post that I helped write was kind of pointing out the flaw of that approach. First, I'll just see if I can just go over really quickly. First, you can either plan something or do something, but it's hard to do both simultaneously, because if you're doing something before you plan, you could be doing the wrong thing. And if you're planning something before you're doing, you're spending time and effort making sure that that is laid out and not actually doing it. And so when the hiring company is trying to get someone in there, they want immediate results. They want something fast, they want something good, and they want something with direction. And you can't do that unless you know the space, you know their objectives, you know what they're looking for, and then the next step is once you pull all that stuff out, that stuff comes back, right? People start interacting, and then you have to either send it over to the right department if it's like docs, or maybe it's you, or you will need to send it into the production team to do a video, or maybe that's you. And most of the time it is you. And so you cannot react after you do an engagement because you're one person and you can't do it systematically. And the lack of understanding that puts the developer advocate or whoever's doing DevRel in a place where they're dealing with the outside community and dropping that ball, or the inside stakeholders and dropping that ball. So when you get started, usually they're like, go ahead and get started. So there is no time for planning. You start producing this work. It looks disjointed. You become reactionary as the stuff starts to flow back. And then anything that you had in terms of planning, loose planning at the beginning, saying, okay, well, we need to make these blog posts. We need to make these changes to our forum and community. We need to make sure that we have this documentation and these code snippets. All the things that you had in your mind of this is what you need, that gets thrown out of the window. And you have to basically just tread water so you don't drown. And then you disappoint the community, you disappoint your boss, and then you burn out, and then you go to your next job. And that's repeats over and over again. So it's really important to either hire a contractor or a consultant to do all the pre-planning, get that sold, get that bought in, or allow enough time to do that beforehand when you hire this miracle person in, or even better, have these two distinct roles. Have someone be able to come in, focus on planning, and someone focus on activities and engagements.
Interesting. Yeah. Like somebody who's higher level and defines the strategy, and then somebody who's more on execution and actually doing the work. Yeah.
It seems like a logical move, but these are very distinct skill sets, and people who do DevRel are very flexible and malleable, and you can code switch to different things. But and so you can think of them doing both, but specialization really matters here. And so you want someone to be focused and making sure that they're spending all of their mental energy really executing on the plan or devising the plan to make sure that it's executed properly.
That makes a lot of sense. What are your thoughts, Matty? Yeah.
I just want to piggyback a little bit because there's a couple things, and this applies not just in DevRel, but like I've been, one of my first manager jobs, I was a manager / contributor, which is the worst thing ever. And we used to have in the same organization, our managers were also our software architects. And as the great Ron Swanson will tell you, never half-ass 2 jobs, whole-ass 1 job. Because you run into 2 things happen there, is either one of those jobs doesn't get done well. That's your best case scenario. But also, Wesley was really right. It's a different skill set. And I think it was Lindsay Homewood that had this really phenomenal blog post years ago that was called, "It's not a promotion, it's a career change." Now, so there's a different skill set. Now, whether that's managing people or just doing the strategy, it doesn't mean that someone can only do one of those things, right? I will say, DevRel contains multitudes. We can, like Wesley said, we can be capable of doing both of those things, but actually sometimes they're even slightly at cross purposes with each other, with our focus and how we have to think about stuff. And one of the problems, and I actually have a lot of sympathy for an organization that does not have a, DevRel program that's like, well, we need both of those things. And we can't, it's would be an incredible luxury to hire someone to lead the program and then also hire someone to execute. Also, by the way, if you're thinking you're going to hire both of those in parallel, don't do that either, because, I've never seen a scenario where, yes, you don't get to hire your own team. That tends to not go well, but it can be a fast follow. And we're going to talk hopefully in a minute about how hiring DevRels has to happen really fast. So don't worry about it. You can hire your leader. You will get your individual contributor pretty fast if your program is good. But I really kind of like Wesley's point, though. Like, it could be that contract or that third party can be on either side. It can either be someone who will just execute, and you can just and I almost feel like if you have to make the choice, maybe go for the strategic first, because unless you have, and I can think of, there's organizations that I won't name where they hired someone on the individual contributor side and there was no one to provide the direction properly, and that person is therefore not set up for success. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have someone who's leading your DevRel scenario. You may have someone in another department that understands this, that can provide that. So it doesn't have to be formal. So you could sit there and say you're a smaller startup and you're like, okay, we have our head of marketing, if that's where it is. And this is someone who really understands community, and they can actually lead the DevRel function for a while. And as long as they can do that and they understand it and they're willing to do it, sure, then you can have someone. But what ends up happening more often than not is we're going to hire this person in, and like Wesley said, expect them to wear two hats, expect them to do both things. This does lead me to another thought. This is an overall hiring thing that is frustrating to me, is when you're looking at the person that you're hiring in to lead, to do that in that scenario, you don't need to hire someone who's done it before. This is this fun thing. We always think we want someone who's done the work before, but frankly, most people don't want to come and do the same thing again, right? So what you're going to get if you are like, okay, well, I want someone to come and create the DevRel program at, pseudocast, this thing that I'm creating. Cool. I'm only going to hire someone who has actually already done that. Well, first of all, that's a relatively small pool that I have to pull from. And also, the only people that fit that pool that will come work for me are either coming because I'm going to throw them a huge amount of comp, because why are they wanting to change jobs, right? Like, why would they want to change? It's not a new challenge for them. It's the same thing. And I don't know about the rest of you. I always like to have, I will move jobs for a couple of reasons. Sometimes it's to back up a big enough truck of money, but I don't know if, especially if you're an early series startup, you probably don't have the big truck of money. So maybe you'll do better to get someone who was part of a great program. And this is the thing I want to point out. You don't have to have done, sometimes just being part of something and understanding it. So this isn't a DevRel thing, but this is how I got my first job as a manager in technology operations many, many years ago, is because I had worked at an organization that had really solid ops practices. And so the CTO who hired me said, look, I know you didn't put this stuff in place, but you know how this works because you've been somewhere, you understand it. You can come and bring this to us. So the same thing, if you've been part of a really great DevRel organization as an IC, you can bring that knowledge. But yeah, I don't want to go do the same thing. Wesley, you probably don't want to go do the same thing you've done somewhere else. None of us do. That's boring, right? And the only other way you're going to get those people is pay them a ton of money. And who wants to do that, right? Unless you're hiring me. Pay me a ton of money.
You can do both. So just the go back to what you're saying about the fast follow, and also how you get someone who's a leader, that if you have someone who has a good plan or roadmap of how they're going to develop the program, that can also entice people to join in terms of that fast follow. Because if you know that you're going into a situation that's safe and you're actually going to be able to do good work, and you're going to make sure that you have the flexibility and also the tools to make sure you're successful, that is extremely attractive, as well as that truck of money. So having a really good plan is also a good perk of a job, and also tells you the kind of the caliber of the program that you want to have. If you are serious about DevRel, you want to plan for it. So if you have someone who knows how to put a plan together, knows how to make sure that the different parts internally, in terms of the internal stakeholders, are really gathered and really bought into whatever you're doing, that is a seal of approval to get someone who's going to be doing the day-to-day out in the world work, to make sure that they know that they're being supported.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
A lot of great information there. So we'll move on to a little bit more about the specifics, sort of just getting into hiring, actual hiring. Is like, what is it about DevRel hiring that is really unique compared to hiring for any other position? And maybe we'll start this one off with Wesley.
So if you've seen one DevRel role, you've seen one DevRel role. I mean, it's almost like there's not a giant template of things you need to do for every situation. So usually, as DevRel is still becoming a thing, the people who are hiring for DevRel are either stealing or cribbing the notes of other people and just saying this is what we need, because the people who are creating the job descriptions and the people who are some of the people who are recruiting for the roles have no real clue about what is a good match for the company. So I would say that is one of the biggest things in recruiting right now, is that the people who make the role don't really know what they're hiring for or what the person will do.
And is it the recruiters that are creating them?
It's the whole line, because if you're doing this first person or first role, The recruiters don't know. The company doesn't know how to explain it to the recruiters. The hiring manager may not know. The whatever the executive sponsor. I've seen companies where in the startup arena where their investors have said, "Well, you need to get DevRel in order to be successful," and so they tell that to the board. They tell it to the board. The board tells it to the CEO. The CEO says, "We need to hire for this," and then they're off and running, and that's how it gets started. I have people who I know who've gotten hired for the role, and then every day their job is mostly justifying why they have a job, saying, "Okay, I have this job, and let me tell you why my job is important." And that's most of what they do, is just trying to evangelize internally to get buy-in and to explain what the heck they do. And that's a huge waste of resources and time. So they need help, and for some reason it's one of those things where they don't reach out and just get the professional help to have an adequate job description, make sure you're attracting the right people. And then what Matty was talking about, some weird or strange weed out criteria that eliminate people from a role. Like if you have to have 20 years of Kubernetes experience or whatever, there's just like, it's just an ill-informed take.
That's not unique to DevRel. That's just
That's
bad
true.
hiring, right? You know.
Maybe a job posting for DevRel should just say, "Hey, we know you know what you're doing, so we're gonna leave it open to you. You tell us."
That's exactly what Wesley's like. I don't want that. I'm not joining a company that tells me it's open. You decide. But I think one of the worst hiring faux pas I saw recently, I think Corey Quinn posted, was the AWS recruiting. Like they had a job ad where they actually had their rejection letter pasted in it.
Oh yeah.
Thank you for submitting for this role. Better luck next time. Something. It was like talking about like hiring fails. If we're talking about hiring fails, do you have any funny stories you want to share? Or I feel like Matty, you have a bunch of funny or fun, painful stories.
I mean, it's we all do, right? Like, and I the problem with like the hiring fails, like I guess it depends on what side of the equation you're talking about, right? Like I guess it's like as you, the person who's going through the process, versus like the hiring person, because I don't want to, like, as someone who's been involved in hiring, wouldn't want to tell stories about, you know, I will say one of the things is why I think it's really important to like have good qualification in the right way. And I'm going to be really careful with how I talk here because it's not supposed to be gatekeeping, but I want people to be set up for success. And this again is not a DevRel hiring story. But this was back when I was hiring sysadmins many years ago. And I just remember, you know, the way that we worked, this was in the olden days of in-person and stuff and all this kind of stuff, is, you know, we would do like a phone screen and we would kind of do a text screen on the phone. And then the person would come in and it would be a day of interview, right? It's your normal interview loop kind of situation. And we didn't, when we first did it, the first phone screen was just more of a like chit chat. And then the first thing that you did in the interview loop was the text screen. And we would then have, sometimes you'd have candidates and they just didn't do it. They weren't there. And they would know, right? When you go through a screen like that and you fail, and then they have to sit through 4 more hours of interviews when you've already known it's gone. And so that was why we sort of changed and said like, okay, we're going to do a little bit better pre-qualification, just to make sure, not to weed people out, but just make sure they're set up for success. And that actually goes back to, I know we want to have some fun stories and we'll get to some, but I think it's really important that whatever you're going to expect out of the person that's coming through your process, that you are as upfront and clear about it as, you know, where nothing is to catch somebody, nothing is to fool somebody. I know there's a lot of contention about coding interviews and things like that. And I'm not speaking on behalf for or against, but I'm giving an example of when I was at PagerDuty, we, for better or for worse, there was a coding interview for our DevRels. I fundamentally disagree with that we did that because it wasn't even a coding type of thing. But the thing that was fun is like not fun, but funny because I know now because I was there is it was, I don't want to say it was very easy to pass the coding interview, but it wasn't about whether or not you could code. It was just, the idea was to see how you handled something for better or for worse. But one of the things I made sure that was really clear after I started there and saw the experience I had was I told our recruiters, I said, we need to tell people exactly what is going to happen in this interview, right? Yes, we're going to have a coding thing. We're going to ask you to write some code in the language of your choice against the PagerDuty API. So that sets somebody up for as much success as possible versus I didn't know. They just said, you're going to write something in some language. And I guessed, luckily, that what it would be. So the point is, no matter what it is that you're doing, you're not trying to trick people, right? We're not trying to catch them. We're not. And there's so much, you'll see all of this bullshit that people will talk on Twitter about how there's so many people misrepresenting themselves and we have to like flush out all these incompetence. And I have been involved in hiring for decades at this point across DevRel and across other things. Yes. Have all of us worked with people that were like, we can't believe how you actually got the job here because you don't know jack shit about anything? Yes. Is it the majority of people we work with? No. Is it more than 0.5%? Not really. It's like everybody probably thinks of one person in their whole career that was that person. But Twitter would have you believe that
it's
90% of candidates are full of shit, right? So, and what's the worst thing that happens? So somebody fakes their way through the interview. Whatever. It's not, it's not worth creating a really bad experience and losing out on possible ones. To maybe paraphrase Chief Wiggum from The Simpsons, I'd rather let 1,000 guilty men go free than chase after them, so we'll, but I don't know. I'll try to think of some funny things. I kind of, you were trying to go for a funny story and I got too serious.
Well, you already got a Ron Swanson quote and a Chief Wiggum quote. So I feel like we can have some good funny stuff, even though it wasn't necessarily related to hiring, but good stuff. And Wesley, if you want to share something or have some fun anecdotes, feel free.
Well, the blog post actually came from a recruiter message to me, but I got one today that was a new one for me. That was
new low or new high?
New low. Oh my gosh.
There's no high. This is low. Sharone, this is 2022. Have you been around the last couple of years? Ain't nothing but lows.
I'm going to blame this on like misplaced incentives for recruiters because they do have a hard job, especially in this market. But the person sent me an email about a new startup and being the first person to run the team. And they sent me the email. This is email, not LinkedIn. They sent me an email and they put my spouse in the two lines. So it's me and my spouse.
Oh no.
Just to make sure I saw it, I guess.
Oh, so both of you. Yeah.
Yes. Let me just put a little caveat of like a little clarification. This spouse was my ex-wife.
Oh no.
So not your current spouse.
Not my current spouse. My ex-wife that I don't talk to and haven't for years.
Oh my gosh.
Was like, and now this person has reconnected us around this job that they want me to take.
Oh boy. Awkward.
I mean, if that's
Block
not
all.
creepy, and I don't know why someone would just like just do that, even if it was.
What kind of stalking, online stalking, do you have to do to get?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And it's just like that is a new one for me. That was
I've never heard that
I am
before, and it's
still
crazy.
Processing, and I have no idea what I'm gonna do.
I still don't understand how people come find me, my email, my work email that's not associated, for example, like with my LinkedIn, like how they find me from there. Like somehow
because there are services, there are services that do this for people.
Oh my gosh. Like that I'll get a message on LinkedIn and they'll be like, somehow they'll suddenly be in my inbox. Hi, you didn't answer my message on LinkedIn. Hello, I'm here like a jack in the box. I'm like, how did you get to my email?
Oh my God. Like there's stories about people like sending Venmo payments with little messages and just trying to get in front of just candidates right now. And that is not the way. That
Yeah.
is not the way. And so
just think
I don't know.
That is quite
whether or
a
not I'm gonna-
story, Wesley.
I don't know if I'm going to call this person and saying, okay, all right, what were you thinking? What was going through your mind that made you think this is okay? How many times have you used this technique, and how many times has it worked out for you? It's like catcalling someone on the side of the road. When does that
They'd
ever
probably have more
work?
success if they added your mom or your dad. Why did you take that offer, honey?
You know what had more success? Put a pay range on it. Maybe that'll be something to like.
Have your grandparent be on it.
Yeah.
I saw that you got an email.
Hey everyone, that was the end of part 1 of Hiring Developer Advocates with Matty Stratton and Wesley Faulkner. Part 2 is coming up very soon, so have a look out for it on the podcast app of your choice. And we're excited to have you here, so keep on listening.